In today's photo deconstruction, I'm going to take you behind the scenes of a fashion shoot using RGB light tubes. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here, and color is an important part of my work. That could be in the clothing, in the environment, but very often I use color in my lighting. Now, if you've seen my class, The Magic of Gels, I actually use physical color gels onto studio strobes. But recently, I've also fallen in love with RGB light tubes. Now these tubes are LEDs and they're full RGB. Now specifically the ones I use are the Nanlite Pavo tubes. In this fashion shoot, I use both the 2-foot and 4-foot Pavo tubes. So I want to take you behind the scenes so you can see how I built this in. Now before we do this, let's actually look at the shot itself. This is why I love these light tubes so much. They give me this almost like cinematic look. It's like kisses of color. It's mysterious. And I love how it creates almost the shine of light on the skin. And so knowing the quality of light and the elements of that light that I like so much, I built the shoot around this concept. So I already knew that I was going to light with the Pavo tubes. So I wanted to have a really beautiful shiny dress that would pick up the textures and highlights of that light. And I also wanted a model who would have beautiful dark skin with shiny makeup so it would pick up the highlights of the Pavo tubes. Now you can see that there is a lot of depth and mystery, and I'm going to show you how I've added that to this scene. So let's actually pop over and take a look behind the scenes. All right, so at first, this looks overwhelming because there is a lot going on, but don't worry, I'm going to break it down. Before I show you the lighting, there is something very important going on in the environment of this scene. Do you see how there's this smoke, this mist to the air? This is achieved using a haze machine. Now, you may be familiar with fog machines that kind of make plumes or puffs of smoke, of fog. But a haze machine, the particles are much finer. It's just a little bit of texture to the air. And when something is backlit, it gives a physical direction of light. I knew this was going to be very important to my shot, A, to make it feel moody and make it feel cinematic, but also because I wanted to create beams of light from behind the subject. So let's actually start with the one light in the scene that is not an RGB tube. So you see the light that is directly behind my subject there. It's really bright and it's creating that strong beam of light. That is also made by Nanlite, and it's a Nanlite Forza 500. On this light, this bright constant light, also our LED, I added a Fresnel. Fresnel is a lens that allows me to focus the light, so I could create just this powerful beam. By hiding it behind my subject, what it did is it created almost a spotlight effect. And this was exaggerated by the fact that there was haze in the room. Now you saw one example, kind of the final shot that I have for this photo deconstruction, but here's another look at the same scene, different composition. Do you see how there's these streaks or beam of light coming out from behind her head? That wouldn't be possible and that wouldn't be visible without the Forza 500 with the Fresnel directly behind her pointed upwards. Okay, so that is the first light in the scene. Forza 500 with the Fresnel attachment. Again, that's a modifier that attaches to that bright constant light. All right, so let's move on to the RGB light tubes. Now, the ones that I'm using are the Nanlite Pavo tubes. I already mentioned they're full RGB. What does that really mean? Well, that means that I can achieve any color that I want. I can make it the exact blue, purple, red, like any color that I want. I can also adjust the brightness and I can adjust the saturation. So it gives me a lot of precision that may be a little bit more difficult if I were using gels because there's only so many gels. Of course, one of the tricks is you can layer multiple gels to get the perfect color, or you can tweak it in post. But I love the amount of control that I get out of these RGB light tubes because I can make them the exact color that I want them to be and I can see it in camera. So let's actually start with the first two that I'm adding. You can see that there's one to the left of the frame and the top here that have the color cyan. These are 4-foot Pavo tubes, and I dialed them to be cyan, and the purpose of these lights were to create a rim light and a little bit of separation on the top of the head. So if we go back over to the original shot, or the final shot, you can see this beautiful light kissing on the side of her face, but also you see how it kisses on her clavicles? I really love that detail, and that's caused by the overhead Nanlite that you see in the behind the scenes. So that kiss on the clavicle is from this overhead Pavo tube. Okay, so those are the first two Pavo tubes introduced, but then I wanted to light her from the front. And so to do so, I added one Pavo tube, one on either side. And so on the left-hand side of the frame, I added a blue. So not quite in that blue-green, a little bit more blue-purple. And then on the right-hand side, I went with just solidly purple. So both of these were also the 4-foot pavo tubes. So you can see, I'm going to go back to the original shot. She's got that kiss of blue on the left-hand side of the face, and then this beautiful purple that just washes everywhere. Now, both of these front lights, I actually had them a little bit darker, a little bit dimmer, so that it was really paying more attention to the reflections. So you can see the highlights on the dress and the reflections in the eyes and in the eye makeup, rather than being bright exposure on my subject. I thought that having the scene be heavily backlit made it more mysterious and also a little bit more cinematic. So those are all of the lights in the scene. So what it ended up being is 4 pavo tubes and 1 Forza right behind the subject. But let's take a look at a couple other details here. My background was a Savage Universal Fashion Gray. I already mentioned that I had haze in the space, but let's also talk about our camera. I was shooting with the Canon R5 and the Canon RF 24-70. Now, the reason that I wanted to shoot at 24-70 is a lot of times I like to shoot with a slightly wider aperture when using the pavo tubes. Don't get me wrong, they're bright, but they're not super bright. It's not the same as using like a 1,000 watt second strobe. And so sometimes I want to shoot at 2.8 and shoot at a wider aperture to let more light in. In this case, I didn't need to. I was shooting at f4 ISO 400. So that just gives you an idea of how strong these LED light tubes are. All right, so that puts it all together, but let's actually pop over and see what I captured in RAW versus post-processing. So the RAW image that you see here, the colors look basically the same. The texture of the light is basically the same. The beam of light popping out of her arm is basically the same. All of that is the same, except for there's one main difference. Everything is a little bit more flat. Doesn't have quite the level of detail or contrast. And the reason is whenever you use haze in an environment, it decreases contrast. Basically what happens is the light hits that haze and it bounces around. And so it kind of fills in all around your shot. And it's almost like diffusion, or a little bit of haze in front of your lens, which literally decreases contrast and detail. So what I did in Camera Raw is I went in and I popped the clarity. I used Dehaze a little bit. I increased the contrast. I popped the highlights, which is what gets you closer to this final shot. I also felt like my eye was being pulled a little bit towards the edges of the frame because of the haze and the light, the light was coming in from the edges. So I did add a vignette to focus our eye back on the subject. Now just a couple more things to note. You can see there's almost a beam of light popping out from her arm. Remember, I said that was from the Forza and the Fresnel. But if her elbow was out further, you wouldn't see quite as much of a beam. I was kind of moving it in and out and watching real time for when it would restrict enough light so you could see that streak, which is why in this other shot, I saw that based on the angle that I placed the Forza, I was able to use her head to actually block some of the light and then see the beams come out from either side of her head, which I quite liked. One of the reasons I want to mention this is a benefit of using a constant light source like LEDs, because what you see is what you get. You can see it in real time, where sometimes seeing these beams or streaks of light can be a little bit more difficult when you're using strobes, even if you have modeling lights. So I really like that I can see in real time what the result is going to be, especially when I'm using haze. So I love what these two shots look like. Now in the first shot, I have her standing up. I was going for longer lines, strong, powerful, straight on towards camera. In the other shot, I actually had her sitting and I was using a little bit more of a wider angle lens, shooting from a higher angle to play with distortion just a little bit, to give a little bit more emphasis to her face and give kind of like a broader view to the scene here. Now, if you would have told me a couple of years ago that I would be shooting constant light sources and RGB tubes or things like that, I would have thought you were crazy. And the reason I wouldn't have believed you is because I love strobes so much. However, the Nanlite pavo tubes have really changed the way that I see and the way that I think, especially because I can capture them with video now. In a lot of my work and fashion shoots, I'm not just shooting stills. I'm also shooting maybe it's behind the scenes or ad campaigns or video motion commercial spots. And with studio strobes, I don't have that same capability. But you can obviously see by these results that I have definitely adapted, and I love my RGB light tubes. So if you want to see the gear that I used in the making of these images, be sure to check out the links in the description below and visit adorama.com. Specifically, I was using the Nanlite pavo tubes, and I was using the 4-foot length. If you want to see more videos like this, and if you want to see how I use these pavo tubes all the time, be sure to like and subscribe because I have a lot more videos just like this one coming your way. See you next time, guys.